The sun has left and forgotten me. It's dark, I cannot see.
Your stories don't define you, how you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief storymaker at Elkins Consulting. If you've ever listened to my podcast, you know I have a thing for food, wine, music, pretty much anything that connects us on a deeper level than just a short conversation. Because even a few seconds of music can connect you with any audience far faster than most anything you can just say. And that leads me into my guest for today, Curt Sassak. I met him on LinkedIn. I saw something he shared, a comment on somebody's post. It was highly insightful. And then I checked out his profile. And you are going to love hearing some of these stories of restarting and transformation in life. And as you know, listeners, I'm all about identity and relevance and how we find that in our everyday lives. Curt, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, no, thank you for having me.
Well, I'm excited to get started. You know that I like to start by asking my guests to share something about themselves that most people don't know about them. And I do that so that we get multi-dimensions of the person that we're about to meet in a slightly different depth. So what do you have to share with us?
Anything?
Anything. Yes, this is not, there's no rating on this show. So
I absolutely hate velvet to the point where touching it feels like is like fingernails on a chalkboard to me. I cannot stand velvet. I don't know what it is. I don't even like to look at it. It just something about velvet. It's some weird thing for me. And I also like Cheetos. So there.
Oh, that's hilarious. So listeners, I was just grabbing a glass of water and I had a sip in my mouth when he said, I hate velvet, and it almost came out my nose.
I literally detest it. The feeling of it is just, I don't know. There's something about it.
I completely understand that. It's a texture thing. I have issues with certain kinds of food, and you've heard that I will eat almost anything to try it at least once. But there's something about eggplant and okra. Those are two things that I have a problem with, and it's all texture related. It's not about the flavor. So I understand. Velvet's a weird texture, but remind me not to wear, a formal gown in velvet around you next time. Luckily, there's not a lot of velvet around these days, right?
Well, no, and I don't see it. I don't recall the last time I saw it.
Right. Well, because upholstery is generally not velvet anymore.
Right.
You don't have a lot of experiences with formal gowns, especially in winter. Because I remember in the early 90s, I was in a couple weddings, both of which were in winter and both of which had velvet bridesmaid dresses. So I know I could just see your face. Listeners, if you could just see his face.
Yeah,
that's hilarious. And Cheetos. Okay. Well, somehow we're going to wrap that into the rest of our conversation. I know we'll find a way. So for our listeners, just so that we can get started in a different part of your life, your current part of your life, when you think about a recent experience in the work that you do, your income producing activities, can you share an experience recently that you really enjoyed, that you really felt satisfying?
You mean as a coach, the life and career strategist?
Exactly.
Really,
your current work.
It's there's a similarity between this and when I was a chef. When I was a chef, if I cooked something for somebody and they loved it, that's a form of payment that's intangible, and it's I made their life better for a brief period of time. But now what I'm doing as a life and career strategist, is the impact I can have on somebody is literally life changing. And I was on a client call last week, and I remember my client said we were talking about something, and somehow she said, "Oh, yeah, I had to replace the well at my house. Like every time I get ahead, something else comes up." And it just so happens that we were in the part of the module in my one-on-one coaching course where we talk about limiting beliefs. And I said, oh, see right there, that's a limiting belief. She's like, what? What is? I said, what you just said, where when you get ahead financially, something else always comes up. Now, my father used to say it all the time, and I used to carry that, and I ended up getting money blocks. And because, limiting beliefs are so insidious and they're so ingrained in us, we don't even recognize them. And, they just kind of fly under the radar. So when I told her that, it didn't really sink in at first because she'd been saying that her whole life. And I said, where did you learn that? Did somebody used to tell you that? Yeah, my dad used to tell me that. I was like, oh, mine too. So that when I brought that to her attention, it got her thinking. And then I walked her through the exercise of what we call in the coaching world, rewriting the narrative, where you take a limiting belief and you write it down. And then next to it, you write down evidence to the contrary. And so I did is I said, okay, tell me about some times in your life where you did get ahead financially and nothing screwed it up. She had to think about it. And then she said, well, I saved up enough money to get over 4 years to buy a house and nothing, screwed up that progress. I was like, oh, that's 4 years. That's pretty significant without any kind of, hiccups. And then I asked her, dig a little bit deeper, and she found a couple other examples to the contrary. And I said, so see, that's not necessarily the case now, is it? Maybe at times it's happened, which can happen to anybody. You have to change your tires or get a new carburetor or replace your well or your TV. But look, we just within 5-10 minutes, we just rattled off it was about, if I remember, 4 or 5 things. There was evidence to the contrary. And then we rewrote the narrative, which is where you write the narrative in a positive manner. Like you might write something like, when I get ahead financially, I get even further ahead. Because when we repeat those negative stories, it's like solidifying it into our existence more. And because you're confirming it more.
Right.
It's like my guitar teacher told me, you are what you practice.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I was trying to learn a guitar solo, long story short, and it came out a bit David Gilmour sounding because I was playing a lot of Pink Floyd at the time. And he said, you are what you practice. So it's the same thing about the stories we tell ourselves, because I know you like to talk about stories. Mm-hmm. And so anyways, to get to the point, we worked on that, and it was just because I do the calls usually on Zoom, and it was just really cool to see her face when she started understanding this, and like, that's, because again, when it comes to limiting beliefs, I mean, that's not the only thing I deal with, but that's one of the things I deal with.
It's a big one.
They fly under the radar.
Right. And until you can name it, until you see it happening or have somebody else, I keep coming back to the fact that I would not have accomplished as much as I have without a coach pointing those things out to me. And even if I knew it at the time, until somebody externally said, I'm seeing a pattern here, I'm not sure I would have been able to change it.
Well, it's funny you say that, because that's the whole point of having a coach, because especially when the work I do is it's about, doing internal work. And that's really hard for a person to see in themselves. I don't care how smart you are, how educated, if you're a coach or not. Mm-hmm. And, like you said about the best, a coach can help you identify patterns within yourself that you don't see. And then, of course, the purpose of a coach is to get you from point A to point B faster than you could on your own.
Right. And I think I don't consider myself a life coach or career coach. I'm more into the communication side of coaching people to improve communication, improve relationships. And one of the things that came up for me, I hired somebody to coach me because I believe in it. And I said to one of my clients, she said, wait, you have a coach? And I said, well, yeah, I believe in it. I know this stuff works. Yeah. Whenever I hit any kind of point where I'm questioning what I'm doing, or I'm not sure I did the best job for a particular client, I go back to my coach and say, hey, can we work through a few sessions? Because I think I'm missing something here.
Yeah.
And I love what you said, because when you see that the expression change on a person's face, when it goes from puzzlement to awe.
Or, oh shit, why didn't I see that before?
Right. Oh my gosh, I get so many of those. I get those when I'm working with a client, and I get one for myself. I'm like, whoa,
yeah.
That was a projection. It's kind of amazing how transparent you can be in order to be helpful. So I love that story on so many levels. I always describe it as not a light bulb moment, but it's more on a dimmer switch. So for instance, I recognize the patterns sometimes, but I can't always change them. And going from understanding it and slowly, gradually seeing it, and then all of a sudden the light comes on bright enough for you to make a change. But I don't believe in a light switch moment, because I think we're all kind of more on a dimmer switch.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And because it's rare that it's like light bulb.
Right.
It's more like a gradual learning, or, well, sometimes I'd say light bulb, but yes, a lot of times it's kind of gradual. It's kind of like, the way I describe it to people is you have all the answers inside you. You just don't know how to look for them or see them. It's like putting pieces of a puzzle together. You have all the pieces.
Right.
You just don't know how to put them together.
Right. And sometimes you don't know what the
gradual thing is. You start getting a piece here, a piece there, and then gradually you have the whole puzzle.
Exactly. And sometimes you don't know what questions to ask in terms of where the pieces are. Where is that piece? I know it's here.
That's why you have a coach.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. So when you think about what you're doing now, and you think about what you used to do, you mentioned midlife crisis, which you called it something else afterward. What was the word you used?
I forgot already.
A reset.
A reset, yeah. or the way I like to describe it, because I like to add humor where I can. If you remember, it's a do-over. If you remember the movie City Slickers, the guy, Daniel Stern's character, was banging the cashier, and they're on that cowboy drive, and for like 2 weeks, and at the end he's like, my life's over. I lost my wife. I lost my job, and I'm 40 or 41 or whatever. And Billy Crystal character, and who's the other guy? He passed away, the other actor, but Bruno Kirby. Their characters are like, no, remember when you were kids, you hit the ball into the tree, you get a do-over. So I like to call it a do-over.
Yeah, absolutely. And as long as you're aware of what got you into that pattern in the first place, you can avoid driving back into that pattern, right? I like that.
After the first time,
Well, how many of us have done it over and over again without consciousness? We get into a pattern we don't even know we're in. So yeah, back to that whole idea of having a coach, which is so different from therapy. So, so when you think about one of your do-overs, I think in terms of the transformative stories, and again, dimmer switch in terms of something has to happen a few times in different ways before you start to see the pattern. My mom once said when I was 18, I was camp counselor and having a problem with one of my colleagues. And my mom said, life is full of trials. And until you figure out what this lesson is that the universe is trying to teach you, you're going to keep experiencing it through your life with different people, but the same kind of trial. So what was one of the stories that alerted you that it was time for a reset or a do-over?
Well, when I was a chef for 27 years. I knew I wanted to be a chef since I was probably 11. And I kind of had my whole life mapped out by like 12 or 13, no joke. And so I was chasing my dream, being a chef and knocking out the goals one by one. And I climbed the top of the career mountain. I did everything I wanted to do. I lived and worked in 7 countries. And I did more than a lot of chefs. I don't mean that in a bragging sense, but I mean it in the sense of I really did quite a bit. I was an award-winning, very successful chef. My career was my passion, even to the point to where I deliberately chose not to start a family or get married because I was afraid it would interfere with my career. So it'd be an understatement to say my career was my identity.
Right.
That's fairly common for anybody who's driven and a high achiever, because you give so much to your career, even to the point sometimes where you may hurt yourself or others. But so anyways, by my mid to late 30s, my passion for my career just started dying. I didn't know why. I thought it was, I needed to change jobs. So I changed jobs several times, and that didn't work because I didn't think for a second, like, oh, I need to change careers.
Right. I don't want to be a chef
That was
anymore.
my life, right? That was the life goal, And then when the realization started sinking in that maybe I need to change careers, then it was like kind of like a fuck you to the universe. Because I'm like, wait a minute, I've invested too much time into this career, and this is the life plan. And so there was a bit of, definitely some defiance, definitely a lot of fuck yous to the universe, because it's like, wait a minute, this isn't part of the life plan. I felt like I was robbed, right? So
right.
To get to the point, I was really down about it. And so, I started, I thought, let me try an unorthodox approach that's, probably groundbreaking. I'll start, I'll drink more. So
I was wondering if that's where you were going with this.
Yeah, then that kind of like created its own set of problems, as it usually does. But I remember I had like quit drinking a couple times and went back. And I remember I was sitting at home watching TV. Actually, it was City Slickers, come to think of it.
I love that movie.
Because, well, here's what's funny is, and this is where it all comes together. So City Slickers, Billy Crystal's character is going through a midlife crisis. And I could resonate with some of the way he was feeling, like very blah. Life was like, so it's just kind of funny that I mentioned City Slickers a minute ago, and we're coming back to it. But so I was drinking, it was after work, I was drinking like usual, had a cigar. And I remember it just kind of just dawned on me. I'm like, fuck, nothing's changing. The same shit over and over again, and I remember it pretty clear. I dumped out the bottle right then and there. I think I may have drank once or twice more after that, but I knew I was done. And I guess I'm one of those anomalies. I could still have a drink sometimes. I'm okay. Just because the thought of going out and getting fucked up just doesn't appeal to me.
No.
So, but with all of that said, that was probably one of the most poignant moments when I was sitting there and just, because I was making shit pay because I took a job in this little town and because I took a job in a small restaurant, seeing it, well, maybe if I'm cooking more, it'll reignite my fire and love of cooking, but no, that didn't work.
As opposed to managing and
because
top of the line.
I was overseeing teams of like
right.
200 multi-million-dollar food and beverage operations, and so for several years I was just stuck. I was negative. I was playing the victim, complaining. I was being a little bitch, and I just kind of and like I said, I just had I don't know if you want to call it an epiphany, but I was sitting there watching TV, and it just kind of dawned on me. I'm like, fuck, nothing's changing. Same shit over and over again. And then, I just.
What's the first thing you did? What like the very first thing, I'm thinking about this because I had a moment similar to that when I was in my last job before I became exclusively self-employed. I had this side hustle. I remember just being bummed, low energy. I'm usually really high energy. I'm at work and I realized, wow, I'm not happy right now. And over the weekend, I like in my head, maybe drinking, I don't remember, but I remember that Monday looking up at my calendar on the wall at work and realizing, oh, it's the 2-year mark. And I'm a 2 to 3 year employee because that's been something that I enjoy, is to change jobs periodically. And I remember looking at the calendar and realizing I don't want to change jobs. I want to make this work for as long as it has to until I can hire myself, until I can do something that really lights me up, where I can see the impact every day of the work that I do. And I remember looking at the calendar and thinking, this is not forever, but I'm going to keep this job. I'm going to make it work for me until I can find the right thing, not just the next thing. I'm visualizing myself right now sitting in that office, which was a beautiful office. It was a good job. And looking at the calendar and thinking, I'm not going to switch jobs.
Yeah.
So and then the very next thing I did was I went onto LinkedIn and I found somebody that I had been connected with for a long time and said, can you walk me through what the next thing might look like for me? And I had this wonderful coaching appointment, like wonderful game-changing coaching appointment. So that was like within 24 hours of looking at the calendar and having that transformative moment, that aha moment. Within 24 hours, I had made an appointment with a coach to talk through what might be next. Develop clarity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did you do next? I mean, did you just quit your job or did you call somebody with your aha moment?
No, I was at that time, there were certain things in my life I was unhappy about that I couldn't change. And I was like kind of at zero in every way, including financially. This was like 12 years ago. So then there was actually another moment. I don't remember if it was the next morning, but it was right around that time. And I remember, so that was the culmination of some of the negativity and the drinking. But then there was also another moment I had where I thought, okay, there's certain things in my life I'm not happy about. Well, actually, I wasn't happy with most things at that point. But I thought, okay, there's certain things I can't change, so I'm not going to stress about that. But there's certain things I can change. And one of those things I can change and have complete control over is my attitude. I can be negative, bitchy, and moany, or I can just accept, okay, this is how it is right now, but it doesn't mean it's permanent. And you can chin up and weather the storm. I mean, smooth seas don't make a skilled sailor. And that was another thing, because that was when it really hit me that it really comes down to mindset, and we have a choice. We all have a choice, and I don't care what somebody's going through. I know that's easier to sit here and say if you're not going through something, horrible, but we all have a choice at the end of the day. You can choose to be a victim and complain, or you can choose to own it. Because also when you take responsibility, you have control over it. And so I had enough of being negative. I had enough of hearing myself complain and bitch and moan. And I changed my mindset. So that was right around that time, one of the first things, but it wasn't anything like right away, like, oh, hey, I call and I quit my job, or because I couldn't, because I wasn't in a good position in my life. I didn't have that
cushion.
I wasn't in a position financially or otherwise where I could just like go piss off somewhere to, Pattaya.
Find yourself.
Yeah, or eat, pray, love the hell and out of myself.
Yeah. Or do some navel gazing.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so those were two significant moments, probably the two most poignant moments within a short period of time of each other that shaped who I am now and what led me to start my coaching business to help others who have gone through similar things.
Mm-hmm. So when you started down the path of being a coach, I know I had to have a certain number of hours of coaching in order to become certified. And the tool that I use, I remember even when I was just doing the practice sessions where I couldn't get paid for them because it was part of my certification. I remember one moment where one of my clients, I'll just call her that, even though she wasn't paying me, when she said, I said something about her achiever, because she has, it's her number one talent in StrengthsFinder. And I said, oftentimes somebody with achiever also struggles with that imposter phenomenon, because they keep on taking on new challenges. And so they're constantly looking for the next challenge and making themselves uncomfortable and not being the expert in the room. And so they're constantly putting themselves in that discomfort, which is part of the achiever thing. So it's kind of a cycle. And I said, do you see that in yourself? Yeah. And I remember this moment where she said, oh my gosh, I never thought of it that way. And I just remember this moment of oh, I do understand this tool. This has real potential. I remember this moment of going, oh, okay, I hadn't put a whole lot into this in terms of what I thought it would do in terms of helping people or helping me in my business be successful, which includes helping people and actually guiding people to understand their talents. And it was that moment that I realized that this has potential, and I'm on the right track. So what was one of your first moments when you're like, I'm on the right track? This could be seriously helpful, impactful.
Well, I knew it right away when I started it, because I had hired a business coach to help me. I've run businesses before, but I've never started like a solopreneur business. So, really the mantra that he taught everybody is, what's a problem you solve that other people have that you can make a business out of? And so there wasn't like a moment per se, like what you described, because I knew that what I went through, a lot of people go through. Usually if it seems like it starts around the mid to late 30s. And so no, I just knew, because I went through it and I knew I wasn't really any different than what other people go through. Although when you're going through something significant, whether it be alcohol abuse, depression, bulimia, I mean, I didn't go through that, but anytime you're going through something serious, the weird thing is you think you're alone, you think nobody can relate. But then once you start looking, you realize that, oh, actually, I'm not alone. And a lot of people can relate and do understand. And then, just that alone makes you feel a little bit better. So
it sounds like your coach kind of like when you went to a business coach and you saw the value in it.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I know a lot of people go through what I went through. And I didn't sit there and calculate, okay, what can I do to make money, or what can I take that back. I did that in the past when I was a LinkedIn coach, and I would teach people how to use LinkedIn to grow, optimize their profile, to show up higher in searches. So that is something, I teach is a supplement to my one-on-one coaching program, but that didn't really feel authentic, because I was denying so much of my existence, a lot of the lessons I learned. So it was just a no-brainer for me, because I lived it. And maybe I should rename my program The Hard Way, because everything I teach, for the most part, I either learn the hard way, or I learn from a psychotherapist, or I learned from an NLP, because I've taken NLP training.
Can you say what NLP training is for our listeners?
Yeah, so NLP, it's basically, I don't know the textbook definition, okay, but it's basically a way to help people. This is my definition, okay? It helps you. It's a way to help you analyze yourself to get out of your own way. So, for example, let's say, like I mentioned earlier, let's say you have money blocks. Well, there are techniques you can use in NLP to help uncover the root of that money block, or whatever the limiting belief is. This is just one example. It's not just about limiting beliefs,
right?
But it's a way of questioning and getting to the root of what may be blocking somebody, or some problem or something like that. But
do you know what it stands for? What the acronym stands for?
Neuro-linguistic programming.
Oh, right. I thought that was it, but I wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Neuro-linguistic programming. So listeners, think about those words, neuro-linguistic. That's basically personal narrative. That's the words you use that your brain is familiar with, that you use to describe yourself and your behavior. So neuro-linguistic. Yes. And I've been talking about that for years. My book is called Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Tell Them Will. So yeah, neuro-linguistic programming. So for our listeners, look it up. There will be some resources in the blog post associated with this podcast on elkinsconsulting.com, along with contact information for Curt and where you can follow him and learn more about his programs. So back to your story, I would like to ask you kind of a wrap up, full circle question about this, because and at first I was going to ask, I can't remember, but I think Cheetos played a role in the movie City Slickers. Can we pull that back in somehow? Didn't they eat Cheetos at one point?
No, I don't think it does.
Bummer. I thought for sure we were going to be able to bring Cheetos back into the conversation, but I did that anyway.
Yeah. No, that's not in City Slickers. There's no. Actually, I don't recall. No, the only food that was like prominent was there were those two guys that had the ice cream company. The characters in the movie,
right?
Ben and Isra or something like that.
Yeah, that was so funny. So when I think about my experience as somebody who is self-employed and who has built a business around improving communication, which is what you're doing as well, whether that's internal communication or external communication, that's the key to changing your programming, is understanding how you're talking to yourself. So when you think about one of your guides, a person who really influenced you, I always think about that first coach that I worked with, Arminda Lindsay. She gave me some feedback that was absolutely a game changer for me. And I still talk to her periodically. But the reason she was such an influence on me was because in our first call, it was just a discovery call. And she gave me so much value in that discovery call about a keynote I was about to do. When I was still employed in the public sector, I'd gotten this keynote in my side hustle. And she gave me this advice that absolutely changed how I performed, how I saw myself, the confidence I had in that keynote. It was my very first big one where they flew me to LA for it. It was a pretty big deal for me. And she, in a 30-minute conversation, gave me so much value. So who did that? Who influenced you in a place where you can look back and say, I want to be that influence every time?
There have been a lot.
Good. That's good to hear.
One thing I liked about a chef I used to work for in the past, his name was Richard. I remember a quote he told me once. This was when I was in my mid-20s. So I wasn't yet a chef. I was a sous chef, which is the assistant for those who don't know what the term means. And I remember he said, and this kind of fitting for how things transpired for me, he said, when your love is food, you'll ultimately be unfair to the one you love. Because to be a chef, and I'm not talking about some shitty corporate restaurant, like in a bank or office building.
Right.
When you're a chef in 5-star serious kitchens, you're working more, and what it demands of you, because the operation will never be the same, will never operate with the same intensity if you're not there. Because if you're moving 90 miles an hour, everybody else is going to be moving 75. So if you want them to move 90, you got to be moving 120. So it's like, imagine a football team without the head coach. It's never, that's the gasoline in the engine.
Right.
And so just the demands of the chef profession, especially when you get into fine dining, is much more. And you got to be there, and so when I left my culinary career, I started thinking about that quote more, because like I said, I had put everything else aside for the career, and I don't regret it, because I had a great career and I learned a lot, and I still got plenty of time if I want to. Well, I'm not having kids, forget that. But
it's part of what makes you such a good coach is that experience. You couldn't be what you are and what you do if you hadn't had the 27 years of life experience doing what you were doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's again, and it's funny, that was the most difficult experience of my life, and little did I know it would lead me to start a business where I'm coaching, executives and high achievers who've been successful, climb their career mountains, but then find their passion died, and they're like, oh, you get to a point to where you're like, okay, I don't know what's next, or you can't quite see the finish line, or maybe you see the finish line, but you don't know how to get there, or maybe like a lot of people, you get to a point in your life where you have, it's like, man, I've been working for about 20 years, and you just need to reprioritize. You don't mind working hard and put in the effort, but you just need a bit more value and purpose out of what you're doing. So, yeah, little did I know what was the most difficult experience and what almost broke me would go on to help me help others. And that's why I do what I do, because, as a chef, I made their life a little bit better briefly when they're eating. Well, if they like my food. But when you're coaching people and you can literally impact their life for the better, there's nothing bigger than that. And that's why
Absolutely.
I do what I do.
Well, I'd like to come back to that just a little bit before we wrap up, because
the Cheetos?
No, not the Cheetos. I like Cheetos. I can't eat them. They give me a headache, but I really like them. But
that's weird.
I know. Well, I keep coming back to this idea of that transformative time where the universe was knocking on your door, the universe was poking you, and you felt like,
I wasn't listening.
Well, not just not listening, you were actively ignoring it or pushing it away. Defying it is the word that you used.
Yes.
And for our listeners, I would love for you to share a little bit about just that word, defying the universe, how that changed. Like I have a story in my head where I was hiking on the mountain behind my house a lot a few summers ago. And in 3 days, I met 3 different women that I had never met before that were relatively new to the area. It's a small town. So I know a lot of people here, have been here over 20 years. And all 3 of these women ended up telling me their career stories and where they were in this frustrating time in their lives, all 3 women at the same time. And that had never been the target audience for the work that I do. And it was the 3rd woman. And I thought, okay, I hear you, universe.
Yeah.
Okay, I know what you're trying to tell me now. So what was your turnaround with that universal message? What was the slap that was heard around the world?
Well, it was, when I the 2 examples I gave before, really, those were the ones that really, where I started a mindset shift and started on a path to better. So the one was the realization when I was having my whiskey after work and like, man, nothing's changing. And then the other one was where I woke up one day and I thought, I'm just tired of living like this. I'm tired of being negative. I'm tired of hating on the universe and myself because I didn't like who I saw in the mirror.
So what was it that turned you to coaching? Why coaching? Because I keep coming back to the fact that no matter where you are, even as a chef, as a sous chef, pastry chef, you have potential for that kind of life-changing impact if you are aware of not just the people you're feeding, but the people you're cooking with. Those younger chefs or more experienced chefs, you have the potential to make them like their job or hate their job. So yeah, that's life-changing. So why coaching? I mean, what was for me, that moment of, I might be missing my target audience pretty dramatically here. Like, what was that?
Well, I knew I wanted to start my own business. So I hired the business coach, to help me. And because, I didn't understand sales funnels and digital marketing and email campaigns and all that stuff and how to brand yourself, how to identify your target audience, any of that stuff. And I just knew because it was, there wasn't, put it this way, when I decided to become a coach, there wasn't a moment where like, I want to be a coach. It's just, I've been through it. I've lived it, because look, if you're going to sell something, especially if it's a service, when you're selling a product, you don't have to be the brand. If I'm going to make a new version of Coca-Cola, it doesn't matter who I am really for the most part. Is it a good product? Does it have nice packaging? Is it priced right? And do you have marketing? But when you are selling a service, like what I'm doing, coaching, you are the brand.
Mm-hmm.
And so to answer your question, no, there wasn't like an aha moment. I just knew that I want to help people, because when you go through some of these experiences in life, they're really difficult, to put it, lightly.
Yeah.
And like when I was a LinkedIn coach, there was so much of myself that I wasn't using, and it just didn't feel authentic. And after like 4 months of being a LinkedIn coach, I'm like, fuck this. No, forget it. And, so it took me a few months of thinking, and I thought, wait a minute, what, it's right in front of my face. And it's kind of weird. You know how sometimes you go through maybe a period of your life where you kind of know something in the back of your head. Like I'm not really surprised I ended up as a coach, because I kind of always saw myself helping other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyways, I mean, everything I teach is based on real world experience that I have lived. So it's authentic. It's real.
That totally makes sense.
So it's a perfect fit. I enjoy it. I like sharing my story, because I like to, like if you look at some of the most famous podcasters in the world, like the Tim Ferrisses and that, what are they doing? They're bringing value into the world. They're bringing value that's going to last long after they leave this planet. And that's what I want to do. I know that sounds a little kind of vanilla,
no,
corny.
I think it's beautiful. No, there's nothing corny about it. And
it's about value and making people's lives better.
And I'll come back to that. Curt, I've known you for 45 minutes, almost an hour. And I have zero doubt that you had that influence in the restaurants, and that there were people that you mentored and developed over time. And that's part of why you ended up where you are doing what you're doing. So I appreciate that. I have many years of restaurant experience from the front of the house. And my husband was a sous chef in a restaurant in Washington, D.C. before we met. So I have a lot of experience in that. And knowing what I know about you just in the last 45 minutes, my guess is that you did have life-changing impact on some of those people that you worked with over those 27 years. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, really, for joining me. This has been such an interesting conversation. We never even got into the whole music side of things, but I'm so glad you joined me, Curt. For our listeners, what are the best places to find your content and to connect with you? And listeners, again, this will all be in the show notes associated with the podcast at elkinsconsulting.com. But let's hear it from Curt.
Okay. Well, first of all, I appreciate you having me. Thank you very much. So where can you find me? I post on LinkedIn Monday through Saturdays, about 7:30 a.m. Central Time. And on my feature section on my LinkedIn profile, I have a free training. So if anybody is feeling a little bit lost in life, or maybe you've climbed you've done well in your career and you've lost your passion and need new direction, or maybe you've gotten to a point where you're like, you know what, I need something more from life. I need to reprioritize. There's a free video in my featured section on my LinkedIn profile. And then I also have a website. It's called, it's curtsassak.net. That's CurtSassak.net. I'm actually adding more things to it. And yeah, I coach people one-on-one. It's a 10-week program. And so what I do is I work them through, basically it's uncovering the cloud that blocks our vision, the cloud that, societal expectations, limiting beliefs, negative stories we tell ourselves. And it's my job to help you see clearly, because at the end of the day, we all want a nice house or nice car and money. That's all great. But what I found from my experience and from my clients is what we really want at the end of the day is you just want to be happy. You want to, and you want to get back to that feeling of, man, wake up and I look forward to going to work again.
Mm-hmm.
But more than anything, you just want the peace of mind and confidence that comes with knowing you're on the right path. And so that's my job, is to get people on the right path so they can find that purpose and fulfillment and happiness.
Terrific.
Life's too short. And I'll close it on, I'm 52, and when I hit the 40s, and was having conversations with people my age or older, that's when I started noticing how How many people in life just settle?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want you to settle, you know? So,
yeah. Well, I keep coming back to the idea that we want to contribute. We need to contribute to be part of something that adds value to our communities. So, listeners, now it's your turn. I'm going to ask you to consider the Viktor Frankl quote that is one of my favorites. And I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have it completely memorized, but Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor. And if he can say this after experiencing Auschwitz, almost anyone can relate to this. And his comment was that there is space between stimulant and response. And in that space is our choice. Listeners, I'm asking you to take that space between something that's happening and how you respond to it, to choose the value instead of giving it an automatic value of positive or negative. Really consider that part of your life that you're frustrated with. Is it happening to you or is it happening for you? Thanks for listening.
Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.